At the heart of this once proud family stood Eleanor Whitmore, a woman whose wealth could buy silence, loyalty, and fear. In a town where money meant power, her name opened doors, and closed mouths, but when Eleanor quietly rewrote her will, on a cold October night, it didn't just shift fortunes, it sealed her fate. Just days later, she was found lifeless in her bed, no struggle, no clear cause, no signs of forced entry, yet behind the gilded walls of Whitmore Manor, secrets older than her fortune festered in the dark. The killer didn't want her empire, they didn't want her millions, they wanted something far more dangerous: revenge for a betrayal buried decades deep, a debt long overdue. Now, every heir, every trusted confidant, even her own blood, is a suspect, because in the Whitmore family, the dead don't rest easily, and the living, they don't forgive. Tonight, we unravel a story where wealth meant nothing, and old sins demanded a price that money could never pay: a powerful matriarch, a rewritten will, and a death that sent shockwaves through an already crumbling empire. Every smile hid suspicion, every embrace cloaked betrayal. In a family poisoned by secrets, trust became a dangerous game, and loyalty was the deadliest lie of all. This isn't just a story of inheritance. It's a story of vengeance, of justice, long delayed, but never denied. The victim: Eleanor Whitmore, an icon, an heiress, a woman whose fortune built towns, whose name commanded respect and fear. Eleanor wasn't just the richest woman in the county, she was the queen of an empire forged in steel, sweat, and secrets. Ruthless in business, calculating in family matters, she made allies and enemies often in the same breath. Those who loved her feared her, those who hated her waited for the day her iron grip would loosen. The stage, Whitmore Manor, once a proud monument to old money and power, now a decaying relic hiding crumbling alliances, whispered threats, and betrayals stitched into its very walls. But it wasn't just the house that held ghosts. The suspects, her 3 children, each bound by blood, divided by ambition: Charles Whitmore, the eldest son, the perfect heir, desperate for approval he never earned; Victoria Whitmore, the daughter, brilliant, bitter, and willing to burn it all down just to claim her place; Daniel Whitmore, the youngest, charming, reckless, drowning in debts Eleanor refused to pay; her housekeeper, Martha Ellis, devoted for decades, yet strangely silent after Eleanor's death; her estranged sister, Beatrice Lane, once her closest ally, now a stranger with secrets deeper than blood; and then, a mysterious visitor, an unfamiliar face seen leaving the manor just hours before Eleanor died. A shadow with no name, and no obvious motive. Everyone had something to gain, everyone had something to hide, and at Whitmore Manor, trust was the deadliest mistake of all. Imagine being one signature away from millions. But knowing someone would kill to take it from you. If you had millions to inherit, how far would you go to secure your future? Let me know in the comments. At first, the story seemed simple, and predictable. Greed, the classic motive when fortunes change hands. Eleanor Whitmore, days before her death, rewrote her will. She erased her 2 beloved sons from her estate. No explanation, no warning, only Victoria, the middle child, and, curiously, her estranged sister Beatrice, remained beneficiaries. To investigators, it screamed motive: furious heirs, broken promises, a race for the fortune before it slipped away. But then, a stunning discovery shattered the obvious narrative. In a hidden compartment of Eleanor's safe, behind a stack of dusty ledgers, police found something no one expected: a letter, not recent, but old. Dated over 40 years ago, written in a trembling hand. The letter wasn't about business, or money, or property. It was about something far darker: betrayal, abuse, promises made, and brutally broken. The letter spoke of a crime buried decades before Eleanor's empire ever rose. A secret involving not just Eleanor, but other members of her family. a sin so grave, that time itself couldn't erase the scars, and suddenly, money didn't seem like the real motive anymore. It wasn't greed fueling the murder, it was revenge, cold, patient, and carefully orchestrated over decades. The killer didn't want her fortune, they wanted Eleanor Whitmore to pay for what she had done. No matter how many years had passed, what drives a person to wait decades to strike? All eyes turned toward the Whitmore sons, Alexander and Benjamin, the golden boys of the family, raised in unimaginable wealth, but living far beyond even their means, beneath the tailored suits and polished smiles. Both brothers carried a mountain of secrets, financial ruin. In the months leading up to Eleanor's death, investigators uncovered a paper trail of bad investments, reckless gambling, and secret debts that would take a lifetime to repay. Alexander, the eldest, had poured millions into a luxury resort venture that collapsed in scandal. Benjamin, the younger, was no better, squandering his inheritance on high-stakes poker and a lifestyle littered with silent partners and whispered threats. The sudden revision of Eleanor's will wasn't just an insult, it was a death sentence. Without her fortune, they faced public humiliation, bankruptcy, and the destruction of the Whitmore name. It couldn't be clearer, but still, the pieces didn't quite fit. When Eleanor was found dead, alone in her sunroom, an untouched glass of wine at her side, Alexander was thousands of miles away, photographed at a public charity gala, surrounded by witnesses. And Benjamin, though local, he was caught on security footage attending a business meeting across town, time-stamped precisely during the window of death, airtight alibis. Ironclad defenses, or were they, still, detectives? Couldn't ignore the trail of desperation these men left behind, the gambling debts, the angry creditors, the fraudulent loan documents. Each discovery twisted the knife deeper. Was one brother clever enough to fabricate an alibi? Was the other foolish enough to trust the system would protect him, or was the real killer counting on everyone chasing the obvious motives? While they slipped away unseen, who do you think cracked first, Alexander or Benjamin? Drop your theory below. I'm watching your comments closely. Amid the swirling accusations, another figure lingered quietly in the background. Isabella Whitmore, the invisible daughter, overshadowed her entire life by the grand ambition set on her brothers. Isabella grew up in the corridors of Whitmore Manor like a ghost, seen but never truly noticed. She wasn't the heir they wanted, not ruthless enough to lead, not obedient enough to disappear. And so, she learned to exist in the spaces between, finding solace in music, books, and the endless pages of a private journal, a journal that, after Eleanor's death, would become a damning piece of evidence. Bitter words, painful truths. Investigators uncovered entry after entry detailing years of emotional neglect and cold dismissal at the hands of Eleanor, not physical abuse, no bruises or broken bones to display, but the kind of cruelty that leaves invisible scars, hidden so deeply they sometimes fester into something deadly. In spades, a lifetime of being overlooked, until the very end. But here, too, the picture blurred. Days before Eleanor's death, Isabella was seen comforting her frail mother at the manor's greenhouse. Witnesses described it as a rare, tender moment between mother and daughter. Smiles were exchanged, tears were shed. Could a woman so filled with resentment set it all aside just days before she murdered her mother? Or was the moment of forgiveness a final manipulation, a way to lower her mother's defenses before striking? Every grand estate has its secrets, and every secret has a keeper. For Whitmore Manor, that keeper was Margaret Hale, Eleanor's housekeeper for nearly 40 years. To outsiders, Margaret was the model of loyalty, quiet, discreet, unfailingly devoted. She had raised Eleanor's children, nursed Eleanor through illnesses, and knew every creaking floorboard, every hidden passage in the ancient home. But loyalty is a fragile currency, easily spent, easily betrayed. In the early days of the investigation, Margaret was barely a footnote. She was, after all, family. But then, one inconsistency cracked her perfect image: the night Eleanor died, the night she supposedly passed away quietly in her sleep. Margaret claimed she had locked herself in her quarters for the night, exhausted after a long day tending to Eleanor's needs. An understandable alibi, except she had the master key to every single door in Whitmore Manor, including the one that led directly to Eleanor's bedroom. At first, it seemed like a meaningless detail. But when detectives examined Margaret's key ring, one key was different, older, rusted with time, an original skeleton key, crafted decades ago when the manor was first built, a key that could bypass every modern lock installed in the house, a key she never mentioned she had. And then came the letter, hidden in the lining of Margaret's old suitcase, a single page, written years earlier by Eleanor herself, cold and clinical. It informed Margaret that upon Eleanor's death, she would be dismissed from service, with no pension, no severance, no gratitude, just a final eviction notice. After 4 decades of unwavering loyalty, Eleanor had promised Margaret a home for life. A promise she planned to break, and Margaret knew it. Betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from those we trust most. Could a lifetime of loyalty turn to murderous rage when a promise is broken? Could Margaret, the woman who stood at Eleanor's side longer than anyone, have been the one to end her life? Before the shipping empire, before the grandeur of Whitmore Manor, there were only 2 sisters, Eleanor and Vivian Whitmore, bound by blood but divided by something far stronger, ambition. For years, the sisters had been inseparable, 2 halves of the same whole, but everything changed when their father died suddenly, and left behind a will that favored Eleanor. Vivian had believed, no, she had known, that she would inherit an equal share of their father's fortune, but when the will was read, Eleanor received nearly everything: the estate, the controlling shares of the shipping company, the family heirlooms. Vivian, a modest trust fund, just enough to live, but never enough to flourish. Witnesses still remember the screaming match that followed, in front of friends, family, and attorneys. Vivian vowed she would never forgive her sister. "You stole my life," she had screamed. "One day, you'll pay for it." After the public fallout, Vivian disappeared from town. For decades, no one saw or heard from her. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said she moved abroad. Others whispered she had fallen into madness. But Vivian's absence didn't erase the bitterness that clung to her name. So when Eleanor died under suspicious circumstances, and a frail, aging Vivian was spotted quietly attending the funeral, old suspicions immediately reignited. Detectives tried to piece together Vivian's life after her exile. What they found only deepened the mystery: a small apartment under a false name, boxes of old letters, never mailed, bitter, angry drafts addressed to Eleanor, and a diagnosis of early-onset dementia, confirmed by her doctors only months before Eleanor's death. Vivian's mind was slipping away, memories unraveling like threadbare cloth, but one thing she clung to with terrifying clarity was her hatred for Eleanor. During questioning, Vivian gave conflicting statements. In one breath, she claimed she hadn't seen Eleanor in 30 years. In the next, she spoke vividly of a final meeting days before Eleanor's death. Filled with rage, accusations, and tears, but with her mind slipping between past and present, investigators were left with a terrible question: was Vivian confessing, or simply reliving a fight that happened decades ago? Memory can be a weapon, or a prison. Could Vivian, battling dementia, clinging to old grudges, have been capable of planning a murder, or was she simply a ghost of the past, trapped in memories too bitter to forget? Tell me in the comments, do you think the estranged sister was capable of revenge? The night Eleanor Whitmore died, there was someone no one expected. No one saw them arrive. No one heard their footsteps on the gravel, but security footage caught a figure, hooded, concealed, slipping past the estate gates just hours before her death. Who was this shadow? In the days following Eleanor's death, the police combed through every piece of evidence, trying to make sense of the pieces, and that's when something chilling was discovered: a teacup, left untouched on the living room table. Eleanor's favorite, but there was something strange about it. The DNA didn't match anyone in the Whitmore family, not her children. Not her sister. Not her housekeeper. In fact, the DNA didn't belong to anyone who had been near Whitmore Manor. In decades, the police scoured the records, checked every guest book, questioned every visitor, but there was no record of this person. No witness could recall seeing them. The teacup, Eleanor's last drink, remained as the only evidence left behind by a mysterious figure, their identity a complete mystery. Who could this visitor be? A stranger, a long-lost acquaintance, or someone from Eleanor's past, someone forgotten by the family, erased from their memories like a ghost? One clue that seemed almost too strange to be coincidence: Eleanor's handwriting. In her last will, she'd included a note, not to any of her children, but to a name that was long hidden. Who was Charles Beckett, Eleanor's closest confidant during her younger years? A man whom the family claimed had disappeared after a tragic accident years ago. A man who the Whitmores refused to speak about, yet Eleanor's mention of him in her final moments suggested something more than just a fleeting memory. Was Charles Beckett still alive? Was he the mysterious visitor? And if he was, why had he returned after all these years? What was his connection to Eleanor's death? The more investigators dug, the deeper the hole grew. A hidden figure with no record. A teacup with DNA pointing to someone long thought dead, and a name that held the key to Eleanor's past, buried beneath a web of lies, betrayals, and secrets. Was Charles Beckett the answer? Or was there something even darker lurking in the shadows, with every piece of evidence? The case seemed to lead in new directions, but no matter where the detectives turned, one thing remained undeniable: Eleanor's death wasn't as simple as it appeared. The more they looked, the more they realized that the family was hiding something, but so was the world outside their estate. As the investigation continued, the family timelines began to cross. The key to understanding the truth lay somewhere between their pasts, buried under layers of long-forgotten grudges and overlooked connections. Then, in a twist that no one could have predicted, the visitor from the night of Eleanor's death was finally identified. Her name? Claire. A woman with no clear ties to the Whitmore family. But she had a hidden connection, and it was one that stretched back decades. Claire was the daughter of Eleanor's former maid. A woman named Margaret, whose tragic death had never been fully explained. The official story was an accident, a fatal fall down the stairs. But Eleanor's family had always been too quick to close the case, too eager to sweep it under the rug. And Claire? Claire believed she knew the truth. She had spent her life blaming Eleanor Whitmore for her mother's downfall, for the untold suffering that came with Margaret's final years. Eleanor had left her mother isolated, ignored, and forgotten, the way a servant is often discarded after their usefulness is spent. Claire's life had been shaped by her mother's untimely death, a death she believed was no accident. Margaret had served the Whitmore family faithfully for years. But when she became ill, Eleanor's attention had drifted elsewhere. The family's wealth, their privileges, seemed to blind them to the struggles of those who had given their lives in service. Margaret had been left to suffer, to die alone, and for Claire, that betrayal had planted a seed of hatred, a desire for justice, or revenge. Claire had grown up in foster care, never truly belonging, never feeling welcome in any home. And when she discovered the Whitmore family's darkest secret, a secret tied to her mother's tragic end, her anger only deepened. What Claire found in those letters would change everything. It wasn't just Eleanor's disregard for her mother. It was a pact of silence. Eleanor had promised Margaret that she would be taken care of, that she would never be abandoned. But those promises were shattered, and Margaret was left to fend for herself. And so, Claire believed that Eleanor had wronged her mother, that her death had not been an accident, but the result of a callous disregard for a life that had served the Whitmore family for so long. Claire had spent years quietly plotting her revenge, watching from the shadows as the Whitmore family thrived in their luxury. She knew that the death of Eleanor Whitmore would leave the family fractured, ripe for exposure. It wasn't money Claire wanted, it was to finally reveal the truth of what Eleanor had done, and to make the family suffer the same way she had suffered growing up, with no home, no love, and no justice. With the truth now in the open, the pieces finally started to fit together. Claire had been the visitor at Whitmore Manor the night Eleanor died. She had come to confront her, to make her pay for the years of neglect and betrayal. And as Eleanor sipped her tea, Claire made sure she would never wake again. What do you think? Was Claire justified in her quest for revenge? Or did she go too far? After months of speculation, theories, and family denials, the truth was finally spoken out loud. Not in whispers or guarded glances, but under oath, in open court. Claire did not deny it. She stood tall, hands trembling only slightly as she told the courtroom how she watched her mother's life spiral into ruin, how Eleanor Whitmore had promised help but turned away when Margaret needed her most. "She took everything from me when I was a child," Claire said, voice cold, unwavering. "So I took everything from her in return." The confession sent shockwaves across the courtroom. The Whitmore name, once synonymous with wealth and power, was now a symbol of buried guilt, entitlement, and long-ignored consequences. Claire was found guilty of second-degree murder, but many in the public, and even some members of the jury, couldn't help but question. Was she a cold-blooded killer? Or a wounded child still seeking justice the world refused to give her? The judge called it a tragedy born of silence, where one family's refusal to acknowledge the past had turned into a wound too deep to heal. The Whitmore sons, once suspects themselves, never returned to the estate. Rumors say they sold the property for a fraction of its worth and vanished from public life. The daughter, Emily, the quiet, overlooked one, left the courtroom in tears the day Claire testified. Weeks later, she was photographed leaving a bouquet at Margaret's unmarked grave. The Whitmore name didn't die with Eleanor, but it was forever altered, no longer just a tale of affluence and inheritance. It became a cautionary story. A reminder that the ghosts of the past don't fade, they wait, sometimes patiently, sometimes not, to be heard. To be reckoned with. Eleanor Whitmore thought she had buried her secrets beneath layers of elegance and estate gates, but in the end, those secrets were unearthed by the very person she underestimated most, the child of the woman she abandoned. The Whitmore estate was sold in 2024 and converted into a private retreat. Claire was sentenced to 28 years in prison. The identity of the person who tipped police off to Claire's existence has never been revealed. Every family has secrets. Some are whispered behind closed doors, others are buried deep beneath decades of silence, but every once in a while, one of those secrets claws its way back into the light, not to ask for forgiveness, but to demand justice. Eleanor Whitmore had power, pride, and a legacy built on silence, but even the richest walls can't keep the past out forever, and sometimes, the people you forget. Remember everything. If stories like this make you look twice at what's hidden behind the smiles, then Dark True Crime Stories is where you belong. Subscribe now to uncover more chilling tales of betrayal, murder, and the twisted motives behind them. Hit the bell icon, so you never miss a case that cuts deeper than money and hits closer to home than you'd ever expect.